Okay, year 11. So the second question you're going to get, second interpretation question, is why might they be different? And it will always be phrased in the same way. In this case, why might the authors of interpretation A and B have a different interpretation? Why? So for that part of the question, you're going to have to look at the bit of information above each source. And that is going to tell you about the provenance. Now, what are we looking for in terms of provenance? What information are we trying to get from that? Well, we're trying to think about who wrote or said this, and we might also consider when and how that's going to impact on what they were saying. And it's really, really important to consider their motivation. Okay, so we need to consider the provenance, the motivation. We could also consider, if we're feeling really brave, the tone of the source as well. But the really important things I think for us to consider here are provenance and motivation. So let's look at who said each. So interpretation A is by a man called Albert Speer, and it tells you everything you need to know. So he wrote this book inside the Third Reich in 1960, and it says he remembers hearing Adolf speak in 1931 at Berlin University. So that might be really important. Albert Speer wanted to become Nazi Minister for Weapons. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. So there's loads of information there that we could perhaps use in thinking about why they wrote what they wrote. So let's start then with Speer, and let me make some notes on the relevant page. So what do we think is important about Speer? Well, the things that I think that jump out to me are the fact that he was close to Hitler, and he actually saw him speak, and we can see that he saw him speak at 31, which was at the point where there was real hysteria sweeping across Germany in Hitler. So he witnessed these mass rallies, and he would have been one of those people carried away by what he saw. So that's going to influence why he's saying what he's saying, isn't it? I think the other thing that was really important for me is the fact that he was a senior Nazi, and he was later imprisoned for being close to the Nazis. So for me, I would say, what's his purpose in writing this? So we know that he would have witnessed this, and he's acknowledging being carried away by seeing what he saw. But I think there's also another purpose here, and you often get Speer used here. I think his purpose here is to justify his own actions. He's saying this, I think, because he's trying to tell you, look, we were swept up in a wave of enthusiasm, as he's called it. We couldn't help ourselves. He's almost excusing himself, I think, for being so close to the Nazis. So I think there's lots of stuff you could take about why he would have reached this point of view and why he's writing this. Now, the other gentleman here, Victor Schiff, this is very different because he was also writing about Germany in the 1930s. But in this case, he's a journalist and a socialist, and I think that's the absolutely crucial thing here, working for an American newspaper. So what do we think then, in this case, about Schiff? Well, we can say that he would have reached his view as a socialist. He would have been deemed to be an enemy of the Nazi state, if you like. Therefore, he's bound to be critical of Hitler because he comes from a different political perspective. Also, the very fact that he is in Paris suggests he's had to leave Germany, maybe because of his political views. And he's writing for an American paper at the time, and obviously whilst this article was written in 1950, he was writing for a US paper, which would have allowed him to be a bit more objective, because he was in a sense outside of Germany. Why is this man writing it in 1950? Well, I think he's trying to give an alternative point of view which doesn't aggrandise Hitler, doesn't make Hitler to be this extraordinary person, but is suggesting that there were events that had driven Hitler into power. So Speer, why is he writing what he's writing? Because he's acknowledging he was there at the time and was swept up in these rallies, and I think he's trying to justify his position as someone who was close to the Nazis, and he's almost trying to excuse himself. I think Schiff is giving the view of a socialist who would have been a natural enemy of the Nazis, and he's trying to therefore give us, he's trying to show the point of view of people who would have been on the outside and would have felt threatened by the Nazis at the time.